Hi everyone, I'm Carl. One of the most frequently asked questions we get here at I2R is how do I properly identify my power cable? If indeed you're running a cable that has a brass hex nut like this and you cannot find any nomenclature stamped on that nut face, then you need to know three things. One is the ID of the hose, two is the copper cross section, and three is the overall length of the cable. The ID of the hose is largely determined by a C increment. A 12C is a 3/4 inch ID hose, and a 16C is a 1 inch ID hose, and it moves in 4C increments. So I go 12, 16, 20 is an inch and a quarter, 24C is inch and a half, and a 32C like this would be a 2-inch ID hose. So once you've determined what the ID of your hose is, it's fairly easy to calculate or figure out what your copper cross section would be. And with a 12C cable, typically you have one 2-aught conductor running the full length of the cable. This is a 2-aught conductor here. That's 133 MCM cross section, and it's indicative of how much current the cable is able to carry. If I move up to a 16C cable, which is 1 inch ID, then I have two of these 133 cross sections running the full length for a total of 266. If I jump up to a 20C, which is inch and a quarter, I have four of those running the full length of the cable, which is 532. So you got the ID, you've been able to ascertain what the copper cross section is inside the cable, then you want to figure out exactly how long your cable is. And there's more than one way to do this, of course. There are some folks out there that measure the hose length. We prefer to go with the overall length, and by that I mean we go from the flare on this side of the cable to the flare on the other side of the cable. And that is a more accurate means of determining exactly what length you need. So once we know the overall length and we know the ID and we've established what the cross section of the copper is, then we assign a specification to it. This cable here is a 20C and it's 120 inches long from flare to flare. So that's a 20C-120, and since it has 4 conductors running inside, it's a 20C-120-4. If it was a 16C, then we would call it a 16C-120-2. because it only has 2 conductors running inside. And that gives me everything I need to know to be able to build that cable for you. The vacuum folks out there, they also have to be able to specify where on the cable they want to locate their vacuum grommet. And that is denoted by the P length. And P stands for power supply. So that P length is telling me how much of the cable is going to be on the outside or the atmosphere of the chamber and connected to the power supply. The V length, which arguably is more critical, is how much of that cable is inside the chamber connecting to your induction melt coil. And so that P length tells me exactly where I need to put your vacuum grommet when I build your cable. So for instance, your specification would be a 20C-120-P33, for instance, -4. And that P33 tells me that I've got 33 inches of cable on the outside of the chamber. We suggest, if you're unable to find an exact specification stamped on any of the hex nuts on your cables, at the end of the day, as long as you know the ID of the hose, the copper cross section inside the cable, and the overall length, your cable expert's going to be able to help you out and build your cables for you. Thank you.